Hello, and welcome to the Faith and Work podcast. I'm your host, Carole Evans. This summer, we are diving into a special summer series, Faith in Our Community, a series that will focus on listening well, loving well, and learning how we can better reflect the heart of Jesus in the community and families around us. In John 13, 34 and 35, Jesus is sitting around a table talking to his disciples, and he says, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also are to love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one for another." And this verse will anchor our series this summer, because throughout Scripture we see Jesus considering making room for people whose voices have often been overlooked. He stopped for people who were ignored. He listened to people who others dismissed. He gave dignity, compassion, and belonging to those who often felt unseen. And I believe we are still called to do the same thing today. Today's conversation is one that I believe will be deeply important, not only for the church, but for our community, for our friendship, and for our families. I'm joined today by Joan Green, a writer, a speaker, a mother, and someone who has a powerful story to share as part of an interracial family. Joan brings honesty, wisdom, grace, and perspective to this conversation, and I truly believe that her voice is one that we need to hear. One thing that Joan says stayed with me: sometimes we need to make room for the voices that haven't been heard. And that's exactly what today is all about. Not approaching conversations with fear or defensiveness, but with humility, with compassion, a willingness to listen so that we can love people better. So wherever you're listening from today, whether you're driving to work, sitting at home, maybe in traffic, and I hope it reminds you that the love of Jesus was always meant to cross barriers that often divide people. Let's dive right in. Thank you for joining us this morning on the Faith and Work podcast. I'm so honored to have our guest Joan with us today. She has an amazing story. And Joan, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being willing to share your story. I feel like I've learned so much from you already, and I cannot wait for our Faith and Work audience to get to know you. So tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from.
Thank you, Carole. I am also incredibly excited to be on this podcast and having this conversation with you. Yeah. So thank you for letting me join.
Absolutely.
My name is Joan. I am a mom. I'm a wife. I live in Maryland with my family, and I, in essence, grew up here. You know, I went away to college and things like that. But we live in a very diverse community in Maryland, around the Baltimore area, and we have 3 young adult children. Adults, I don't know. And we have lived in our home 30 years, and my husband Kevin and I have been married for 34 years, and it's been quite a journey. But that's a little bit about me.
Yeah. So you recently wrote a book, which was why I had originally asked you to come on the podcast to talk a little bit about your book. So I was very intrigued by the topic. So tell us a little bit about the book that you wrote and what led you to write the book.
Sure. So the name of the book is Navigating Two Worlds, From Blind Spots to Awareness in Interracial Families. So it's a kind of lengthy title, but it really summarizes really the last 34 years of my life. And what led me to write the book was, it was a specific moment in time. And people ask me this often. I think when I reflect back, it was a culmination of a lot of God winks, as we call them, or times where God has put me in this place, and I finally saw it, heard him, all of those things. Yeah. It was during COVID, so this took me over 5 years to write. So there's that part. But it was during COVID, and our adult children were living at home with us, and there was a lot of racial tension going on across the country, as everybody knows, in addition to COVID. Yeah. And there was that one moment where George Floyd was murdered and had been murdered. And we were sitting at dinner, and I just felt a very heaviness in the room, more than just being frustrated. And as we started to talk, my family kind of opened up about how deeply this was hitting their hearts, not just George Floyd, but Breonna Taylor and Freddie Gray and all of the people before, but in that moment, it just was almost too much for them to bear. And so we started talking about it. And as we discussed how important this was to them and how they were connecting back to the racial disparity in the country, I realized that as a white mom, a white woman, I didn't have the depth of not heartbreak, because I was heartbroken too, because any human life, right?
Yeah,
but
right.
I just didn't have that depth of connection back to it. And so that kind of spurred me into trying to gain understanding, and then ultimately just putting my thoughts on the page and creating the book.
What is something that you feel like people from the outside, they often misunderstand about interracial families? Because it's easy for someone who hasn't experienced it to think, oh yeah, I have a friend that's Black, or but being a part of a family unit is different. So what do you feel like people often misunderstand about that relationship?
That's a really great question. And I think people are curious, and that is a good thing. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but being curious is a positive thing if you're willing to hear the answer to the question you might be curious about. And I think people misunderstand that oh, they're just a family like us, or there is a complexity to having interracial beings in your home, right? Biracial children. My husband is African American, and there is a complexity that unless you are aware of it, you don't know what that adds to any marriage. And I know, Carole, you and I have talked, like, marriage is work. Marriage is hard, right? And so when people look at our family, they may see the work that any other family goes through, but they may not see the deeper conversations that really are necessary to help the family thrive.
Yeah. Oh, man, absolutely. So speaking of that awareness, how can people become more aware without making other people feel like they're being studied or singled out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the biggest shifts for me was realizing that awareness didn't come from asking others to teach me, right?
Oh, that's
it
good.
started with my own reflection and my own willingness to learn. And I think that translates into examining our own assumptions, our own blind spots and perspectives. And that is done before you place the weight on somebody else to explain their experience. So approaching people truly as humans and from a person-centered lens, not as an example of who they are or what they might be. I think that changes everything.
Yes.
So when we do engage to help people become more aware or to try to be more aware, it should feel like you're building a relationship, not like you're researching them. I don't know if that makes, if that resonates. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such a valid point, because for any of us to feel like we're the one being researched, you're right, it does put that weight and responsibility on us. And that's not something I like to feel, but I'm sure that there are moments when I've asked questions through that lens, not meaning to or not even realizing it. And even just hearing you say that brings back some conversations that I thought, I thought I was doing really good in that conversation. And now I'm like, I probably should have handled that a little differently. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Really
and I think that was a big thing with my husband too. Like, so we have this moment, this aha moment, and then I choose to figure out what is white privilege, and I choose to figure out what is missing in my life. They didn't ask me to do that. So then, my first instinct is go to my best friend, go to my husband, who is my husband, right? And just go back to him and be like, okay, so what about this? And what about this? And he's already exhausted, especially in that time. He's already he didn't graciously did answer my question, so I give him all the credit. But I could see how it just drew from his energy. And so that is where there are so many books, and there are so many, there's documentaries, there are podcasts. So it really behooved me to start digging in and finding those answers on my own. And then I can check in with him. And I think that's something, we may talk a little bit about, but checking in is okay as long as I'm doing the work and we're not imposing that on the other person. I think that's really an important point too. And I know I probably shared this with you, but I have a friend who has worked in the DEI space for most of her adult life, like truly an advocate for DEI, and she's white. And so I felt really safe calling her, and I called her and I was like, Jackie, this is what I'm going through. This is what I'm hearing. And she was really honest with me. And she's like, you know what? I can't be your answer person either, because I've been doing the work for 20 some years. You have to do this on your own. I'm here for you, but you have to figure this out. And I expected her to give me like the bullet points and then I would move on. And that isn't what it is. It's a lifelong learning. It is a daily learning, and you really have to own that one on your own.
Yeah. Was there a resource that really helped you in that learning to have a different perspective and to change a little bit of maybe some things you had assumed? Was there a specific podcast or book that you read that really helped you?
So many. I tried. So Be the Bridge, by I think it's Toni Morrison.
Okay.
That one was a really great one because it's faith-based, and that helped me. And not everybody, walks into faith-based things. There's a book called This Book is Anti-Racist. It's by Tiffany Jewell. It's more for teens, but I found that it was really relatable to me because I had such, lack of knowledge. I know everybody heard about white fragility. That's a tough one. And Emmanuel Acho, I think is how you say his name.
Yes.
His podcasts are fantastic. He has some really great things. I would say there's one called So You Want to Talk About Race. I have to be honest, like some of them I had a really hard time getting through. And the reason is, and this is not for me to be creating sympathy at all, but the reason is I was so far off the mark that as I'm reading it and realizing that I am this white woman who these books are speaking about, and having to really own that was hard. And again, no sympathy required. And I don't know if I'm 100% yet, right? Because it still is. It's still a hard thing when I see something like in a documentary where white people truly hurt the Black community over so many hundreds of years. I am part of that, and that is still something I'm navigating, so to speak. But those were good resources. And not as a plug, but on my website, if you go to my website, there is a resource that you can just get for free. And it has podcasts, books, articles, documentaries. Amazing. Right. So that way, if people really do want somewhere to start, that was my first best way to offer support.
Oh, that's wonderful. We will make sure to link that in the show notes for today, so people can find that, because I know that there's a lot of people who are curious on where do I even start, and how do I navigate learning on my own without just finding a voice that you can trust and a voice that can give you a new perspective, which is great.
Thank you.
How is your faith? You mentioned kind of walking this out in your faith. How has your faith shaped the way that you've navigated the hard parts of the challenges of your family dynamic?
I could not have done it without faith. There is, this is not something, so I would say too, God put this book on my heart. So without, and I think I shared with you earlier, it took me 5 years. So I kept pushing him away, and I was like, no, I don't know enough. I'm not a DEI expert. No, I'm not, imposter syndrome set in.
Oh, for sure.
And it really was only through prayer and continuing to have that small voice speaking to me. And then finally my husband was like, you are not being obedient. You need to just get the book out there.
Put it on paper.
Exactly. So a little bit of prompting from my husband, but a lot of God. And and also just finding the words. I pray every time before I speak, because we're not always going to have the right words, and that is okay. I just know that if he speaks through me, it may resonate with one more person. It might come out a little bit more of what he would want me to say. So I think faith for me, has been huge. And also just in our family, it's just a big component of who we are.
Right. Are there some scriptures and truths of the Bible that have really helped to kind of ground you when things felt really hard during those COVID years, where there was so much tension every time you turned the news on, like it was something else happening? It felt every environment we were in. At work, it felt charged. At home, it felt charged. Every environment felt so hard? Were there some truths that really helped to ground you during those hard days?
Yeah, so well, there's a whole Bible full of them, so
Yeah.
we could be here for the next I don't know how many hours, but
Yes.
there are three that like I think come back again and again. And one, Kevin's mom, this was her favorite, and she even wrote it down, and we have that piece of paper framed where she wrote this down for her children. And that one is Isaiah 54:17, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. And in those moments, thinking of what the country was going through, that was a global perspective that we as a family unit are okay. God is protecting us, and we're going to be okay. And so that was a big one. And then for me personally, because I get stuck so often, I think this is a pretty general, but Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. If I don't say that to myself every day, or twice a day, I don't even know. And that one is just my personal need for God to be there and to remind myself that I'm not alone in any part of the journey.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a good one that probably many people know. And then the one that I kind of keep as a little Post-it note under my laptop on my desk is Matthew 22:37, which is love the Lord with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Because if I need to remind myself that I also need to show him love in order for him to be there so he can strengthen me so that no weapon will be formed against blah, blah, blah. You know, it kind of all works together there.
It does. I think that's kind of the point. Like it's supposed to all work together.
Yes, so right, Carol.
That's awesome. One of my favorite verses is John 13:34 and 35, when Jesus is talking to the disciples. And this group of people couldn't have been more different from each other.
Yes.
And the study of all, I love studying the life of the disciples. But he says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. And then verse 35 says, by this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. And I think we forget that how we love each other, that is supposed to be our testimony.
Correct. Yep.
And we forget it, and we get on rampages, or we get on these issues, or we forget, we get stuck in our own world, in our own small world, and we forget that loving other people outside of ourselves, that is our testimony.
That's so true.
And it's just one of those things that anytime I'm struggling with an issue or a topic or a person, I can come back to John 13:34 and 35. I'm like, okay, how am I loving them? You know, how am I showing the love of Christ to them? And that really helps to kind of keep me grounded. What does it look like for you to reflect Christ in conversations around race? I'm sure you've been in some conversations that were pretty hard. So how does it look to reflect Christ in those conversations?
So number one, I'm adding your verse to my list. Thank you for that. Like I said, there's a whole Bible full of them.
I know, it's so good.
But that one's a really good one. So, and that ties right back into this question, of course, which I love. I think I've been thinking about like how does this show up, right?
Yeah.
And I think reflecting Christ in these conversations looks like leading with humility, not with certainty, right? Not knowing exactly, but being humble and open. It also means seeking to understand rather than to defend, and
that's good.
Value the other person rather than being right.
Yeah.
I think another part of reflecting Christ is having the courage to engage, because if you avoiding the conversation doesn't reflect love either, right? So those three things are kind of my top for that.
Yeah, that's really good. For people who are hearing this and they're thinking, man, like, I would love to talk to somebody about it, or I would love to be open to conversations, but they're afraid of saying the wrong thing.
Sure.
What would you say to them?
Well, the first thing I would say is don't let the fear of getting it wrong keep you from showing up.
That's good.
Because if you, and obviously, now I don't know the verse, but God did not give us a spirit of fear. So
right. Power, love, and sound mind.
Correct.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if we walk in that, growth also comes from movement and not from perfection. So trying it is going to help you grow. In navigating two worlds, a big part of the journey is moving from blind spots to awareness, right? And that only
Yes.
happens if you're willing to lean in, to listen, and to learn.
Yeah.
I would just say you may not be able to say it perfectly, but if your heart is open
Yeah.
and you're willing to listen and then adjust. So even if you make an error the first time, keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Try to do better. And one of the golden threads sort of through this book is the Maya Angelou quote, do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of right there, like, do the best you can. Nobody
Yeah.
is, as long as you're trying, you're doing more than somebody who's not trying,
That's
right?
true.
Or more than you did before.
Yes.
But when you do, and something goes awry and you learn a lesson, do it better the next time and give yourself the grace to do that.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. What are some practical ways and tangible ways that we can love and support interracial families in our churches and where we work in our community? Because those are the opportunities that we have to show empathy, to be open to conversation. So what are some practical ways that we can do that?
So a few things that come to top of mind. And for me, I think it came back to what I've learned along the way, and that is love is something we choose to do. It's an action word. And so you can say you love all people until you are doing something about it. It isn't action. It's not in action yet. So simple ways look like maybe being intentional with inclusion. So making sure interracial families feel seen and not just present. A lot of times we're in a big group at a church, and interracial families may feel like they're there and maybe do belong, don't belong, not sure if they belong, not sure if you're accepting them, not sure.
Yeah.
Make sure they feel seen and welcomed, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of by being mindful of your language, checking in with them, make sure they're doing okay, listening without trying to fix. And
That's so good.
Yeah, and being willing to learn what you might not yet see. You're only seeing the exterior, right?
Yeah.
And the other part of that is, if you're in a work or any situation, whether so it could be a smaller, environment too, and you see something or hear something, speaking up when something feels off, even though you don't have all the answers, because I think, especially when you walk in faith, that little tug tells you when something isn't right?
Yes.
So speaking up in that moment, whether it is addressing the person that might have said something that you heard and asking them why they said that, or whether it's talking to the person in the interracial family, even a moment later, and just saying, how are you feeling right now? What can I do to support you? Acknowledging that there is beauty and complexity in navigating these two worlds. And then really, this is the uncomfortable piece, but being able to sit in both worlds, like with your person or with your friend or with that family you're trying to welcome, being able to be on both sides.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
When you think about things, we've talked about what to say and how to empathize and how to show God's love. On the opposite side of that, what are some things people should avoid doing that we may not even realize that we actively do it? But are there some things that right off the bat you think, oh, we should just generally avoid that?
Well, I've thought about that over years of
Yeah.
what I could have avoided or whatever, and I would love to give a list, but I also think there's something like if there's a child in an interracial family and they have curly hair, you don't need to touch their hair. Like that's a thing, right? Everybody feels like they need to touch the child's hair. There are things like asking, and this happened to me many times, like at the grocery store, I'd have my kids with me and people would be like, oh, what are they? Well, okay, they're children.
Right.
They're also black and white, and they're whole people, and they're, so putting those curiosity questions that don't really lead to understanding, that might be a place to kind of avoid.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But I would say too, and if you have a question and you want to, you're burning curiosity, right?
Yeah.
You really need to know. So in order to be a little bit more respectful and then intrusive, I would say it's more about how you ask the question. Yeah. So is it coming from a genuine desire to understand, and with no pressure on the other person to respond? I guess the idea, Carol, is especially as a white person talking to an interracial family or a Black person, I could tend to go into a question wanting a certain answer because that's what I think. Those are my assumptions. So I'm assuming this, I expect you to answer that. Really shut that down if you can, and ask the question and then be okay with the answer. Because so that the assumptions are gone, and also remember that you're not entitled to hearing their whole story. And this is with any human. Like if you ask a question of anybody, you're not entitled that they share their whole story. That some people do, and that's lovely. But some people are more private and don't want to do that. So I think, so I don't really have like a list of exactly what you shouldn't do, but I would say be mindful of how you do it. Like keep your posture open, create space, listen without judgment, and don't touch somebody's hair. That's just not okay.
No, that's a great point. That's a great point. Thinking back, kind of flipping the tables a little bit here, was there some feedback that your kids gave you, or just learning maybe some questions you asked them that you were surprised by their answer and you thought, oh, I wasn't expecting that answer?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So part of this book is that I never did any of that for over 28 years of our marriage, and my children were in their 20s. Never even thought to ask them along their journey of growing up how they were feeling. And that's really a really big reason why this book is out there, because I want other families to not do that. It's really hard. We created love. We had faith in our family. We built our life. And so that would be one thing, would be to just ask people who have biracial children, just talk to them along the way and remind them that they are wholly, well, in this case, wholly Black and wholly white. They are full humans and one whole person. Now, as I started writing the book and as we got a little bit bigger, honestly, it was until we were working on editing the book that I sat down with them. So just this past summer, I sat down with them and really asked, how was it growing up? And I was surprised at almost all of their answers. All three of them felt completely different. All three of them had different experiences, and two of them went away to college, and their college experience, they were not prepared for leaving the county that we lived in, which is a very diverse county. They went out into this world ill prepared to answer questions about their biracialness. And as a parent, my gosh, I was so caught off guard by that. And I'm heartbroken because I had all these years with my husband to prepare them and didn't even think about it, because we moved to a diverse, that's where we bought our house and that's where we raised our kids. So we're like, oh, diversity, check. But it isn't about that. It's really starting at home, creating those conversations and preparing them. So the example I gave about the grocery store, like when somebody says, what are they? I was not prepared to answer that. And so I'd be a little bit sassy and I'd be like, oh, they're kids, haha, and move along. That's great, Joan. But what I learned now in reflection, right, I thinking back, there's two things. And I did ask them about this. They weren't mad about it, but what I did is I showed them, number one, it's okay to be disrespectful to somebody and talk like that. Like, that's not polite. And number two, I inadvertently reinforced that their identity didn't have any complexity or any importance to me necessarily. So what are they? In that moment was a teaching moment for me to be Christ-like and teach the other person, even if the other person didn't want to be taught in that moment. That was my opportunity to say, oh, thanks for asking. My husband is Black. Obviously I'm white. My children are biracial. What else did you want to know? But I wasn't open to that because I just didn't know. And so those are the things that I think, had I set a better example, my children were like, if I had been more actionable, they would have caught on to it a little bit more. So,
I don't know what I would do in that situation. So I appreciate you sharing your experience, because just thinking through it, I'm sure whatever the sassiest thing that came to my mind would be what I would
first
say.
thing out the gate. Oh, I tell you what. And I'm Irish, and I have a little bit of a fire in a good way, but I tend to just, and that has been a huge shift for me over these last 5 or 6 years, is just really pausing before I let those things come out of my mouth.
Yeah, for sure. Oh man, that's good. So when you talked about growing up or being in a diverse area, I'm in kind of the opposite. I'm in rural Tennessee, where there is some diversity, maybe downtown or in some of the cities that are a little bit closer to like college areas. We have people from different parts of the world, but traditionally in Knoxville, it's not very diverse. Right. And so for churches and for people who are listening in different types of work environments, what are some things they can do in those environments where it is not normally diverse, and they can make sure that those people that are Black or are of any other race that looks different than they are, how can they feel inclusive?
So it's a really great question. I think for me, I guess it would look more than just being in the same room. It would be truly seeing and valuing another one's lived experience, right? So it is choosing curiosity over comfort. We talked about listening over assumptions and love in action over good intentions. So I think people of other races are especially Black, are very in tune to I guess a lack of authenticity, right? So if you're trying really, really hard, but you really maybe don't want to, I think that energy is easily felt by the other person. So in my work life, our entire organization is based on person-centeredness and a person-centered approach. And I work with people with disabilities. And so different population, but we always, every decision and every conversation starts with a pause to think about the person sitting in front of you or the person across the table, and thinking about what are their needs, wants, and desires in this moment. Yeah. And I think if people just thought about that for a second, because I don't want to say everybody, but I feel like across the country, maybe across the world, we all know there is a racial division. Yeah. So if we know that, again, back to my golden thread, right? If you know that, then think about that when you encounter somebody of a different race, and think about how they might be feeling in that moment. I feel like once you do that and you're empathetic and you open your heart, the conversation will be much easier because you're already thinking from their shoes. Right. And I've said this too. I cannot walk a day in my husband's shoes. I will never be Black. I will never be male. Like, I just can't be him. So all I can do is think about what I already know about him, what my assumption might be about him, and then start my conversation. So one of the tips that I often say is, ask the person, is this a good time to talk about this? Yeah. Just because I all of a sudden want to talk about race or I want to talk about whatever doesn't mean he's been Black all his life. Like, not new news to him, right? Right. and I don't think we think about that. We as white people who are trying to do better, that's somebody said to me, your urgency is not my emergency. Like, you really, it behooves us to create a safe space, ask if now's a good time. And then the other thing I think about, you meant the question was about a church. So in a church, I think it's trying to shift long-held perspectives. A lot of churches are very grounded in tradition and perspectives, which is such a blessing. At the same time, it can also be the roadblock, right? Right. So making room for the voices that haven't always been heard. Are there people in leadership of other cultures? Are there people who lead small groups of other cultures? What are the things in your church where the people that come with diversity are able to be a voice, right? Not just a participant, right? Right. Yeah, no, that's a really great point. I think I've heard the phrase, and you and I have talked about this before, of the phrase of "I don't see any color," and that's, we think we're being fair when we say "I don't see any color." No. And really, that's one of those things we shouldn't just take out of our vocabulary. No, we just shouldn't. I probably should have added that to my list earlier. You're right. That's a really good point. And I think color blindness is, again, it's a kind of a whitewashing way of just of avoiding the fact that people who have different color skin bring a whole history and a whole background and experiences that you and I will never have. Right. And right. And so treating all people the same isn't really the best approach
No, it doesn't
necessarily to
work.
creating community.
Yeah.
And yes, yep, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
No, that's good. That kind of reminds me of it was kind of a silly story, but it was one of those mom wins for sure. I was riding down the road with my son Eli, and I think it was 5 at the time. He's about to be 7 now, but I think he was 5. And he said, "Mom, can we be a different color?"
Oh,
And I said, "Well, no." And my husband and I, if you are listening but have never met me, we are very, very white. We have a lot of European, and my husband is English through and through. And so we are very, very white. And I said, "No, babe, we can't change our color." But then I was curious, and I said, "If you could change your color, what color would you be?" And he said, "I would be black." And I said, "You would?" And he said, "I think it would be so fun to be black."
oh,
And riding down the road, it made me get really teary because I thought, okay, I don't think I'm doing everything right as a parent, but if you can see other races and you can think, I'm really curious, that must be so fun to be them.
Right, right.
I thought, okay, something is clicking in where we're creating an environment where they're thinking, my skin is very white. My son Jackson said, "Mom, why am I the whitest kid in my class?" His eyebrows, you can't even see his eyebrows. They just blend in with his skin. We are like an SPF 50 kind of family. Like, we're just so white. And I said, "But that's just the skin we have. That's our family background." My ancestors came through Ellis Island. My husband's ancestors, his dad came through from Wales when he was 8. So our whole family is just very, very white. And but we can be very, very white, and we live in the country, and my husband is an outdoor hunter, fisherman, and all that good stuff.
Right.
And we can be traditional white, and we can still have a culture, and we can still have a home environment where we create a curiosity and we create conversations. Absolutely. That we can talk about things not in a spirit of judgment, or not in a spirit of fear, or not in a spirit of privilege.
No. And at 5 years old, that's such an amazing perspective. And I think that's one of the things. Our children aren't born with a sense of racism, right? They just aren't. So if we can encourage our young people to continue to be curious. So I know our kids, 2 out of the 3 identify stronger with the Black community. One of them is stronger with the white community, but very much willing and open to learning more. And, as young adults now, they're on their own journeys. Again, my caution is talk to them when they're younger so that they don't have to figure that out at a later age. But so I think that knowing that there's so much to learn about another community is important too.
Yeah. That's a great point. And then I think for us as parents too, also, you mentioned age appropriateness, which is so good and valid. My husband is a history teacher, and he has often said, the 2 huge marks on our American history are our treatment of slaves and our treatment of Native American Indians. And he talks about that a lot to his class. And so it's learning when and how to bring up those things, and when and how to show our kids, different movies that have a racial element. We've watched some movies and then paused and had some conversation, and then watched a little bit more and paused and had some conversation.
Absolutely. And it's the books that you bring into that. And I think I shared with you, I ran a daycare at my home for 10 years. I was able to be home with my children, and just amazing while they were young. And I had over 10 years, I don't even know how many I've had. Not hundreds, but I had, upward of 30 to 50 children in and out through those years. And only 2 were African American. Remember, I live in a diverse community. So in that moment, I even look back on that and think I had the opportunity to bring culture into my house and didn't do that. But what I'm leading to is the books. There are books and every family can have. You don't have to be in a racial family to have a book that shows people of other denominations and races. So I think that would be another thing for parents. If you aren't sure how to start the conversation, get some books. And to your point, watch a movie or 2 and stop and pause and have those conversations. I think it does start when they're young, and if you can do that little drop in the pond, then it does
Yeah.
create the ripple effect that when they get outside of their home, they are going to be able to be the voice of that diversity in the community.
Oh, yeah. That is wonderful. Joan, thank you. I have one last question for you, but thank you
Sure.
so much for just coming on and sharing your story and kind of sharing your family with us and sharing your experience. It's been a really, really good conversation. I just appreciate you so much. If our listeners that are, we have people from the U.S. and people all over the world that are listening, and one thing I've learned from travel is that this issue of diversity and racially charged conversations and environments is not exclusive to the U.S. It really is in every culture. But if our listeners, wherever they're listening from, if they could walk away with one mindset shift, what do you hope that is today?
One mindset shift would be, please remember that love is an action word, and to love somebody is to do something about it, and just try.
Yeah.
Try your best and show how much you have love in your heart to offer to every single human you come in contact with.
Yeah.
Whether it's just smiling at somebody in the grocery store who you might have looked away from.
Yeah.
And that's any color, that's disability, that's anything. Like smile, say hello, do something to show that you're a loving person. It doesn't have to be groundbreaking every single time.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't go well, give yourself grace and try it again.
Yeah. Oh, Joan, thank you so much. That was beautiful. I appreciate that. Is there anything that we didn't get to talk about that you wanted to share today?
Not at all, Carol. This has been really wonderful. I appreciate you taking the time to invite me on. And no, I'm thrilled. I hope that, I guess if there are people listening and they want to learn more or want to talk deeper, I am always available. There's so many ways to reach me, and I'm there. I know you'll put them in your show notes, and my website is the first place. But I would love to just talk with people. I'm not the expert. I'm just working through this like everybody else is. I just have 5 or 6 years under my belt, maybe more than somebody else. So I guess my offer is anything I can do to help that ripple effect continue. I'm more than happy to do that.
That's awesome. Okay, well, we will make sure to share the website and then your link to your book and everything there.
Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook and all the things.
Yes, we will share all of that so people can connect with you.
That's great.
And I'm sure they will. But thank you so much for being on today.
Carol, thank you. This has been wonderful.
Been an honor.
Yep, thank you. I feel very blessed, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
As we close today's conversation, I keep thinking back to something that Joan said earlier in today's episode. She said sometimes we need to make room for the voices that haven't yet been heard. Isn't that powerful? And honestly, I think this really reflects the heart of Jesus so beautifully. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus continually moved towards people who were overlooked. He listened, he welcomed, he valued people who society often pushed aside. And as followers of Christ, we are called to reflect that same love in our communities today. I know conversations like this can sometimes feel uncomfortable, unfamiliar, and even emotionally charged. But growth often begins where we choose to listen with humility and love. And that's why this verse continues to anchor the series, Faith in Our Community, this summer. By this, all will know that you are my disciples if you love one another, John 13:35. Not by how loudly we speak, not by our appearance, not by our background or culture, but by love. I'm so grateful to Joan for joining us today, for sharing her story so openly and helping us to better understand how we can support, encourage, and care for the interracial families in our community. If this episode encouraged you, challenged you, and helped you to see things in a new way, I would love for you to share it with a friend and leave us a review. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for continuing to grow through the Faith in Our Community Summer Series. Until next week, just remember this: faith isn't meant to stay inside the walls of a church. It's meant to be lived out in our homes, our workplaces, and our communities through the way that we love one another every single day. I'll see you next week.